CALPADS Error Resolution, PSTS0481 error. Special education student must be older than 16 and have an exited SENR record. So we always suggest consulting the CALPADS error list when troubleshooting any error. And as you can see, we have the error number, the error name, the error description, field validated, and suggested resolution from left to right. A common mistake when troubleshooting errors in CALPADS is just to try to troubleshoot the error based on the name. The name is not descriptive enough to identify the error. It's used for reference. So in this case, the PSTS0481 error has the name special education student must be older than 16 and have an exited SENR record. This can be very misleading, as we will show as we navigate through this error. Now, the error description provides details that are useful. If the education program participation type code equals 30 special education, then the student must be older than 16 and have an SENR record with a valid school completion status or student exit category. In this particular error, the education program is the PSTS, post-secondary education program. So we're looking at PSTS records with the participation type code 30. That identifies students that are special education or were formerly special education, and they must have been 16 years old at the time of exit. So the fields validated are going to be a complement of student enrollment fields, student information fields, in particular the student's birth date, and the PSTS data fields, the academic year, the participation type code, all those come into factor, right? And then further details are under the suggested resolution. Ensure the student's enrollment record where the exit date falls between the graduation date and the graduation through date. If the student does have an SENR record that meets the criteria of 1, then confirm the completion status or the student exit category code. If the completion status is 120, 250, 320, 360, 330, then the student must not have a subsequent SENR record. If the completion status is terminal, 120, 250, 320, 330, or 360, the student must not have a subsequent SENR record. Confirm that the student is at least 16 years old at time of exit. So there's 3 different criteria in the suggested resolution, and we have to sometimes look through all 3 criteria to identify the source of the error. So some good resources to identify information about the PSTS and this particular error are the CALPADS User Manual, or would be the CALPADS User Manual, which students require post-secondary status records in the end of year 4 submission. So we can see a list of the students that have a completion status code or an exit reason code. Of particular importance, it says LEAs are required to survey students with disabilities who exited secondary education in the prior academic year. So we want to make sure that those students have exited post-secondary education. The CALPADS FAQs has several FAQs related to the PSTS data collection. So this particular question says, what school enrollment and exit date range should be used for students who should be surveyed for the purpose of post-secondary status? Students with disabilities who exited secondary education in the prior academic year and did not re-enroll. So that's further information. Students cannot re-enroll if they're going to be surveyed for the PSTS file. And it tells us the exit reasons, the acceptable date range for the exit reasons for them to be surveyed. And then, of course, the CALPADS code set. It defines the different exit reasons. And we can use this to get an understanding of why certain exit reasons are allowed and others are not. In particular, those exit reasons that suggest the student is returning, like the transfer codes, those students would typically not be candidates for the PSTS. We're looking for students who have exited and are not returning. Pay close attention to 102, 120, and E125. These are exit reasons related to students with disabilities, and all 3 would allow the students to be exited and return for transition services. So that's something that you want to be careful with when you're exiting a special education student with a 102, 120, or 125. You want to know if they are going to return for special education services. So let's look at causes for the PSTS0481 error. A potential cause is that a student with the PSTS record is missing a valid exited SENR record from the previous academic year. So either the exit reason and completion status is not valid for a student to have submitted a PSTS record, or the exit date is not in the correct date range, or there is a missing SENR record altogether and the student has not been exited. Another cause may be the student with a PSTS record type code 30 special education is not 16 at the time of the SENR enrollment exit date. Lastly, the student has a subsequent enrollment record in secondary education. So the student was exited, the student was 16, however, the student was enrolled again for either transition services or continued to attain their high school diploma. Now let's look at a demonstration of resolving the PSTS0481 error. Okay, so here we have the PSTS0481 error. Special education student must be older than 16 and have an exited SENR record. So we have 3 such errors. And of course, you can always access the troubleshooting section of the CALPADS User Manual by clicking the link by the error code. And then you have your SSIDs, which takes you to the student detail screen. You can also view the data in the error by clicking the view button, right? So typically I like to right click the SSID. I've done that here 3 different times, so we can access either or any of these records. I've already done that, so we have all 3 available, but they all are showing similar causes. So let's look at a record. So we're going to be comparing the enrollment record. So we're at the student detail screen. You see we have the enrollment record for the student and the PSTS record, right? So as we go through the error list, this is a good example because we always say do not rely on the error name. The error name does not always provide enough detail for you to troubleshoot the error. You have to look at the error descriptions, the fields validated, and the suggested resolution sections when you're diagnosing errors. And that's why you want to consult the CALPADS error list or the troubleshooting section. When we look at the record for Port of Los Angeles High, we can see the student was exited in 6/6/2024. Comparing the birth date, the student was just about 18 years old. So just the name of the error, that special education student must be older than 16 and have it. It meets this criteria. Remember, this is just the name. Then we go down to error description. If the education program participation code is special ed, then the student must be older than 16 and have an SENR record with a valid student school completion status exit category. So let's look further to see if we can identify what's a valid student school completion status and exit category. So we do have in the suggested resolution, understanding the error and suggested resolution. The same information for this particular error is included. I do prefer the suggested resolution, so we're going to examine that. So suggested resolution number 1, ensure the student has an SENR record where the enrollment exit date falls between the graduation from date and the graduation through date, 8/16 to 8/15 in the prior year. Basically, the student must have an SENR record where the student is exited in the prior year. That's step 1. So let's look at the student's record. We have a 24-25 PSTS record. It's a special education record, PSTS. We can see that we have a 23-24 enrollment record with the exit date and the exit reason code, completion status, the whole 9 yards. So criteria 1 is met. We look at the exit because that's where we were directed. So we have an E230-120. So what did it say about the 120? If the completion status is 120 here, then the student must not have a subsequent SENR record with the greater than the graduation date. E230-120, and here's the problem. There's a subsequent SENR record, right? So we have a PSTS record for this student, and there's a subsequent record, and that's the problem. It has nothing to do with the student's age. The PSTS record is supposed to be submitted when the student has left secondary education, being that this is a special education student. They've continued on probably with transition services, and therefore you can see there's actually 2 years of enrollment. So this PSTS record, this line of enrollment, was not the exit of secondary school, which makes this PSTS survey invalid. So to resolve this error, you would delete this record. When the student finishes their education at LA Unified would submit a PSTS for the student. And so that's what triggered the error here. So that's a good demonstration of resolving the PSTS0481 E4 error. All right, good luck with your troubleshooting.